attorney at Center for Constitutional Rights, which is an NGO. It's a nonprofit based here in New York. We've been around since the 1960s. We grew out of the civil rights movement and working with grassroots and community-based movements as sort of the lawyers who work with those groups. Started as a very small group of about 13 people and have now grown to about 50. I work specifically in the Guantánamo project, which was started in 2002. And with my colleagues, there are 5 of us, 5 attorneys. We represent a group of men who are detained at Guantánamo Bay. And we also coordinate a really large network of lawyers ranging from, mainstream white shoe law firms, which has been kind of amazing to see, considering that in 2002, when Guantánamo opened, no one wanted to touch these cases, and there were huge implications for resources and funding, and part of the reason actually why it took so long for us to, once lawyers did have access to the prison, to actually be able to see everyone there is because we were working with a very small group of lawyers at that time. But it's now grown to, 600 is the number we throw out, and I think that's true at one time or another, a wide range. So that's some of what I do. I want to thank Cydia and the organizers for having me here. I've spent way too much time with lawyers, so it's refreshing to be here. And I realized I was a former musician, how uncreative I've become because I have no great images and I'm just going to talk to you. I think my presentation is probably going to be more practical and kind of descriptive about the work that I do and our clients. And I will make some general connections, I hope, to the role of images in the context of Guantánamo and producing the enemy, and specifically in the context of secrecy, which is the backdrop for much of Guantánamo's history. There also maybe, I realize, again, in being around lawyers who are working on Guantánamo all the time, I may make references to things that require a little bit more explanation. So please feel free to stop me and ask me now or later when I'm done. I wanted to start with just talking to you about a situation I'm in with one of my clients, which one of my colleagues is leaving for Guantánamo Bay on Monday. And a few weeks after him, I will be going down as well. I've been down a few times. Both of us are going to visit a client whose case has motivated me to work harder than I probably ever have, but who I'm dreading to see as well, because I don't know what to tell him at this point about why he's still in prison. His case is one of those open and shut cases. He should have been gone long ago. A clear innocence, factual innocence case, but he's still there. His name is Jamel Meziane. He's an Algerian. He was picked up in Afghanistan in late 2001 after the U.S. had begun bombing the country. And as he was trying to flee the fighting, he was captured by local police and turned over to American forces for a bounty of $5,000, which is how many prisoners were seized. He spent 1 month in an airport hangar turned prison in Kandahar, Afghanistan, which was one of the temporary holding facilities at that time. And then he was flown blindfolded, hooded, goggled, muffed, deprived of every sense he had for 17 hours, for the 17-hour trip to Guantánamo Bay. And he was one of the first prisoners to arrive at Guantánamo. And as one of the first, he was held in the infamous camp that we all know well, Camp X-Ray, the images of which we've seen, in a 6x6 open-air human cage, essentially. That was February of 2002, and it's now 6.5 years later, and we're talking about how long. I can't believe how long the war in Iraq has been going on. I can't believe how long we've been talking about Guantánamo, given all the new information we have about who's there and what's happened there. Jamel has never been charged, and despite hundreds of hours of interrogations, including sessions where he's been chained to the floor and held in a room for up to 30 hours with heavy metal music blasting, the government has never produced any evidence or even made any allegations that he is a member of Al-Qaeda or the Taliban, that he engaged in any kind of fighting against the US or its allies, that he ever picked up a weapon or even had any training in weaponry, and or that he had any connection to 9/11, which, if we remember, was the purported basis for the blank check that Congress gave President Bush to go into Afghanistan in the first place. And that's how we sort of started on this road. I forget sometimes the connection to 9/11, just given how things have spiraled completely out of control and become disconnected. The last time I saw Jamel was in July, and at that time in June, the Supreme Court in the US had ruled for the second time that prisoners at Guantánamo Bay have the right to habeas corpus. And I had told him then to hold on, this was the second time, and he'd been let down the first time. And I said, no, but this time it feels different. And there's an election coming up, and hopefully there'll be some good changes. And just hold on, because you will have your day in court. And now, that was July, it's now October, and it's been over 3 months since that decision. And habeas is supposed to be a timely remedy, and it's already 6.5 years after he was brought to Guantánamo. Had no chance in that time to go before a fair person and challenge the basis for his detention. And the day that we can get into court and tell a real judge his story and challenge the government on the lack of its evidence is still uncertain and perhaps still very distant, even if there is a change in administration. I don't know that Guantánamo would be the first thing that even Barack Obama would address, though we're hoping, and laying out white papers for him. But in any case, there are legal and political analyses and reasons for why and how it is that we're nearing 2009 and Guantánamo is still open with men who have never been charged and have never had a fair chance to go before a judge and challenge their detention. And that after all we know about the torture that was used to extract unreliable confessions, the farcical tribunals, which some of you may know, the combatant status review tribunals, which were a joke, and I can get into how they were a joke, maybe in the question and answer period, that determined that everyone at Guantánamo was a so-called enemy combatant, which is a made-up definition anyway. And the fact that hundreds of men by now have been released from Guantánamo after the government finally realized after years that they had nothing to do with anything. But despite all that, we still have, for example, a U.S. Supreme Court justice, and that would be Justice Kebriael, who's quite conservative, and that's an understatement, warning that granting prisoners the right to habeas and potentially freedom, and this is a quote from his dissent in the recent Supreme Court decision, which was Boumediene versus Bush. He said it will have disastrous consequences and will almost certainly cause more Americans to be killed. So this is in 2008. But I think despite all the very complex legal and political reasons why Guantánamo is still open, and we still have that kind of sentiment and information out there about who's at Guantánamo, despite all the information on the other side, talking about their innocence, stories like Jamel. I think one other important reason why we are where we are relates to what we're talking about tonight in terms of narratives and imagery. And I think we have been up against and fighting a very powerful government narrative, actually, about who our clients are. And that we've heard again and again in the courts, and that we have been told through recurring images in the media about the nature of the enemy and why we need Guantánamo.